bringing in their goods from different areas. We have to utilize vendors from the local area to stimulate our economy down here also. We have to hire more qualified residents into the casino industry. We're busing them and training them in from Pennsylvania and as far as New York, from what I understand. I mean, we have to really have a cooperative effort between government and the casinos to move this city forward. It's a must. We have to do it. Thank you.
Next year, the city budget is really in the hole by as much as $25 million. What specifically would you do to cope with that shortfall?
I usually have a lot of input with the budgets, and like I said earlier, I believe I can operate on 190. That's $11 million off the top. This year, I read in the newspaper about this lady in communications, $68,000 in 1 year overtime, and she's the boss, signs her own overtime, and laughs about it, I heard, over telephone calls. We got to freeze the overtime in 2010. No overtime. Comp time. If you have to work over, I worked in the police department. I didn't get overtime for many a year. I got comp time. That's what I worked for. And I worked 16, 20 hours a day on operations sometimes, narcotic undercover operations, 20 hours a day. I didn't get a dime extra. Got to freeze that overtime. We got to really tighten the belt. Some of these police department trips and training and seminars, they add up to a lot of money. I mean, we got to really tighten the belt this year and eliminate that, except for necessary state-mandated things. We can't have any more people taking trips.
And you think that'll cut out
that
$1 million?
That could all be cut out of the budget. And this has gone to each department. Each department. There's trips galore going on around here.
But it's council's budget, isn't it?
It's council's budget after a period of time. You can't really do too much with the cutting until you get an itemized budget, which is thick. And once you get that,
I'm just wondering if you think that council has done its job. If it's council's budget,
council does their job. I do my job. I can say that. I do my job. Cutting the budget. It could be done.
Yes, I think there are two sides to this equation. On the one hand, we have to look at increasing revenues, and on the other hand, we have to look at ways to try and cut expenses. There's no question about that. That's how you try to get to a happy medium. Speaking of overtime, I think your newspaper correctly reported that under the Langford administration, overtime is down significantly. As a matter of fact, on the next council agenda, Executive Order number 2 of 2009 will be introduced, which limits the amount of overtime that any one city employee can accrue. But in terms of increasing revenues, obviously you do that in the biggest way by attracting ratables to the city of Atlantic City, and that's why it's important to try to jumpstart as much development as we can. But there are some smaller things that we can do too that, though, or while they're a drop in the bucket, it is a step nonetheless in the right direction, like advertising in some of our street ends, which is a proposal that I've put forward, like increasing the amount of parking meters. City of Atlantic City forever has charged 25 cents for a half hour to park. In Philadelphia, it's $2 for every half hour. Increasing our fees for certain aspects of city government. So we need to try and raise revenues as much as we can. On the other side of the ledger, as I said, we need to attempt to try and cut expenses. Overtime is certainly one way to do that. I would respectfully suggest to you that if you look at some of the initiatives that we've put forth in my prior administration, such as hiring the traffic control officers, where the police overtime budget was $3 million, and the overwhelming majority of that came from police officers who were assigned to do traffic details. The going rate, if my memory serves me correctly, at that time was about $33 an hour. So at time and a half, the city has to pay a police officer $50 an hour overtime for traffic detail, where we could hire a civilian at $10 an hour to do the same job. It's those kinds of initiatives that we need to look at, to replicate, and to seek to do more of in order to try and bring the city into some kind of balance. In closing, let me say this. I've heard Mr. Kurtz propose that he will cut the city's budget by X amount of $1 million by having a 20% layoff, and now he's down to 15%. The aggregate salary and wages for city employees is over $100 million. 15% of that is $15 million. We have 1,600 city employees. We have about 400 police officers, 250 firefighters, about 100 lifeguards, and about 50 911 telecommunication operators and emergency management personnel. If you add all of that up, that's 800 employees. Now, nobody's going to be laying off cops and firefighters. So if you take them out of the mix, you're left with 800 city employees. The real question is, if the average city employee out of that mix earns a salary of $40,000 a year, and they don't, it's not that exorbitant, but if they did, how many employees would you have to lay off in order to realize a $15 or $16 million savings? You're talking about 400 employees. It's never going to happen.
Well, talking about those employees, I was vice president of the union there, negotiated a couple of contracts, did a lot of things. The mayor said he would stabilize the taxes. They now want to, in your paper reporting, want to freeze the wages for the employees in 2010. I guess is that how we say it today? 2010, 2010. On the employees that he spoke about that should be protected. These employees gave back to the city of Atlantic City by congruently all joining the state health benefits program. Unfortunately, right after we did that and saved the city $4 or $5 million, the state came down and put another 25% on the city that has to pay for the higher health care from the state. Now they want to come after the employees again and take away their raises that were negotiated properly. I don't think that's the way to go. Before the reval, the city raised the taxes on the people 9 cents per $100. And the reval came in, tripled the assessments, doubled the taxes. I was paying $400 a quarter, paying $800 a quarter. They essentially doubled our taxes. These are the people that live in homes that pay their property taxes out of their wallet of their job or whatever their family can get up. So now, just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, the council raised it 3 more cents per $100 right after the reval. Now, who's driving who out of Atlantic City? The government or the casinos are driving the people out? You tell me. Got to lower the taxes, and that's good for business. All those businesses, their property taxes went up double. If you take an oath for office, you're supposed to follow what the Supreme Court says or what the judge says. Otherwise, it's contempt of court. You don't do what the judge says. But if you take an oath of office, you're supposed to follow the rules of the city, the ordinances of the city. I would have followed the hiring freeze. I wouldn't have hired anybody in this interim 1-year term that the mayor had. Not only hiring people, but as a union rep from before, they don't post the jobs. You can't just throw people in jobs and give them jobs, which has happened in Atlantic City, with no skill, no trade, no understanding of even the job that they have. Just hire them, let them be this, let them be that, and they're all there. But maybe nobody's working. As far as the audits that the city gets, now we know the FBI, the state controller's office, everybody's in the building looking at all the records of the government. And audits have been occurring year after year after year. I have the list of them at home of all the recommendations that the auditors put on the city. The city don't do hardly any of them to correct what's in the audits. So you pay for an audit. The audit tells you, well, you better stop doing this, you better do that, and the city doesn't do any what's recommended to solve their problem. I would offer the employees of Atlantic City an early retirement incentive to retire. We did it before, I must say, and the city saved $22 million. Well, where'd the $22 million go?